I probably could have gone my whole life not knowing anything about Jesse James other than he was an American outlaw of some sort. But it has come to my attention that there is a cemetery near here that claims to have his body, his grave, because he faked his death and moved to Texas. And there have been multiple exhumations over the years to try and prove this, and it sounds like, Mr. James, you are an iconic corpse.
Howdy, y'all. How you doing? It's me, notorious outlaw Jesse James. Jesse, you will be a-asking, aren't you from the Midwest? Why do you have that crazy accent? Well, I live in Texas now.
So when were you born, Jesse?
I was born back in 1847 in Kearney, Missouri, to the Reverend Robert James and Zelda Zerelda James.
Okay, Jesse. So what was your childhood like?
Why, not so bad. Had a brother, Frank, and a family farm. No, that's farm. We had a family farm.
Wait, you mean you don't remember?
Look, Sonny, I'm over 170 years old. The mine's not what it used to be. Wanna rob a bank? The early half of the 20th century witnessed a crop of Jesse James imposters popping up all over America. Men in Missouri, Colorado, and Texas each claimed that they, the real Jesse Woodson James, had faked their death in 1882 and had lived on, free of the crimes of their former life. Kind of like all the Anastasia Romanoffs, except with so many Confederate flags. Seriously, if NASCAR can ban Confederate flags, maybe we can get to work on some of these cemeteries. You just pluck them out of the ground. You go, bye-bye, bye-bye flags. I mean, I get why certain people would want to be Jesse James.
The legend around Jesse James is that he was a Robin Hood sort of character, that he robbed from the rich to give to the poor. But that was really public relations. I don't think it was the truth. He was really just more of a criminal, like a through and through, 100% bad dude.
T.J. Stiles, author of the book Jesse James, Last Rebel of the Civil War, went so far as to call him a forerunner of the modern terrorist. The image of Jesse James as this sexy, pro-Confederacy, rebel Robin Hood was largely fabulated by the ex-Confederate soldier and journalist John Newman Edwards and, well, Brad Pitt. As a young man, Jesse grew up in the pro-slavery, pro-Confederacy, Little Dixie part of Missouri. Raised by his mother, Zerelda, a steely 6-foot-tall woman whom a Union soldier once called one of the worst women in the state. Jesse was brought up with a deep hatred of the Union and a deep devotion to the South. Also, his mom Zerelda got her arm blown off when an incendiary device was thrown into her home in retaliation for a detective that her, quote, affectionate, obedient, and dutiful sons had killed. Point is, if anybody made Jesse James, it was Zerelda. But Jesse cut his teeth with the Confederate guerrilla fighters known as bushwhackers. Joining their ranks at age 16, Jesse soon took on the bushwhacker belief that murder got you respect. Jesse and his brother Frank went on to ride with the aptly named bushwhacker Bloody Bill Anderson, a man who Stiles called the personification of horror. If Zerelda made Jesse, Anderson taught him the art of ruthlessness. After all, Bloody Bill was known for scalping Union soldiers and carrying them on his saddle as trophies, hence the bloody in Bloody Bill, you get it. Jesse rode with Anderson on numerous Union attacks, most famously the slaughter in Centralia, where Anderson's gang stopped a train of unarmed Union soldiers headed home and stripped, executed, and mutilated 22 of them. Now, Bloody Bill died in 1864, But Jesse and his brother Frank had learned the tricks of the bad guy trade and went on to become feared killers who robbed trains and stagecoaches and banks in the name of Confederate activism and, well, money. Thanks to Edwards, that's the journalist, Jesse especially became a hero in the public eye as a leader in the fight against Northern oppression and the battle to restore Confederate power. Plus, people were thrilled, if not terrified, by his sharpshooting and quick-draw skills. Pew pew! After an illustrious career of killing all the people and robbing all the places, Jesse James was killed at the age of 34 by a new recruit to his gang, Bob Ford. Ford was after the $10,000 in reward money put up by the governor of Missouri, along with some railroad and express companies. Believing he could trust 21-year-old Bob Ford and his brother Charlie, Jesse had asked them to live with him in his new St. Joseph, Missouri home. There, they waited for their chance to catch the gunslinger unarmed. They got that chance when he put down his gun to dust a picture. Yes, Jesse James's fatal mistake was to do some house cleaning.
That's why I don't clean my house. It's just too dangerous.
Bob shot him in the back of the head, and on April 3rd, 1882, Jesse James passed into history.
Oh, did he?
3 days later, on April 6th, 2,000 people gathered in Zerelda's front yard in Kearney, Missouri for Jesse James's funeral. It was there that Jesse James was buried under a coffee bean tree in the yard, where he and his brother had played as children. Offers of money were made to Zerelda for the body of her slain son. I mean, the corpse of Jesse James could bring in big money. A promoter even offered her $10,000 for Jesse's body, but Zerelda refused. For a while. Eventually, hard times won out, and she turned her home into a museum where people could walk away with a pebble from Jesse James's grave for the price of 25 cents. Jesse rested in peace under that coffee bean tree until 1902, when per his wife's wishes, yes, he had a wife, also named Zerelda, also his first cousin, so there's a lot we don't have time to unpack there, he was exhumed and his body moved to Kearney's Mount Olivet Cemetery to be buried next to her. 500 people, including his brother Frank, his mother, his son, Jesse James Jr., and about 50 grizzled old bushwhackers, attended the exhumation. Upon revealing Jesse's remains, it was noted that, quote, the skin was drawn taut over the face of the outlaw captain, leaving the features plainly recognizable. The head was turned to one side, revealing the ghastly wound. His son confirmed the identity of Jesse's corpse. So, an interesting post-mortem story, but not exactly iconic. But wait,
What if that was not Jesse's body at all?
after Jesse's body was moved and reburied is when other Jessies started popping up. And while some were compelling, though ultimately proven fake, one of the Jessies has endured. J. Frank Dalton. In 1948, at the age of 100, this man named Dalton admitted at long last what had been weighing on his heart, that he, Jesse James, had faked his death in 1882. Dalton captured the imagination of Jesse James fans, and despite his knowledge of the outlaw's life being kind of iffy in places, Dalton just chalked that up to old age, people were all too ready to embrace Dalton as Jesse James, rediscovered. Dalton died in 1951 at the age of 103, 9 days after a promoter named Rudy Turilli threw a birthday party for Jesse James in Granbury, Texas. Dalton was buried in Granbury, where his body still lies under a headstone that reads, you guessed it, Jesse Woodson James.
First thing you see when you drive in is the Jesse James plot. So they're all in. This cemetery believes they have Jesse James. It is so hot. You're gonna have to drag me out of this car. It has to be right here. Graves, that's a little Little on the nose. Oh, there it is, there it is, there it is. I saw the Confederate flags. How you identify Jesse James? Jesse Woodson James, September 5th, 1847 to August 15th, 1951, this is the best part, supposedly killed in 1882. Which, if you're from Granbury, Texas, you do not believe Jesse James was killed in 1882. You believe he died in 1951, right here in Granbury, Texas. When the man, Jesse James, was buried here, the original headstone said J. Frank Dalton. But this headstone, saying he was Jesse James, was put here in 1984. At that point, I think the town of Granbury had really gone all in on the idea that the guy buried here was in fact Jesse James, American outlaw. What I want to know are the laws around switching headstones. Like in 1984, how did they get the right to just put a headstone that says Jesse James on that grave? Like if I am buried as Caitlin Doughty, could someone come in and just put a headstone that says Becky Jarvitson, and all of a sudden my grave is Becky Jarvitson's grave? What are the laws around that? What are the politics? Is it cemetery policy? Because the town decided it was Jesse James, it was allowed to be Jesse James? Like, that's messing with history.
So by the time the headstone was switched, a lot of people believed Frank Dalton was Jesse James. And there were some good reasons to believe it that went beyond a 100-year-old man's confession. Lawyer and former Texas State Attorney General Wagoner Carr assembled a number of documents that he believed proved that Dalton was Jesse, including the 1951 autopsy report identifying the body as Jesse James. Evidence on the body included a missing tip of his left index finger that Jesse had blown off as a boy, and a whole bunch of old bullet holes and wounds in just the right places. There were also affidavits from Dalton's friends on the Wild West show circuit who had heard him admitting to being Jesse James. With all the hoopla over who was and who was not Jesse James, Professor James Starr of George Washington University decided to try and put a stop to all the speculation. In 1995, he got permission to exhume the body of Jesse James, not the one in Texas, the one that's buried in Missouri, and conducted mitochondrial DNA testing on it. Mitochondrial DNA testing proves relationship via DNA passed down through women. So Starr tested descendants of Jesse's sister Susan against the teeth from Jesse's exhumed remains and hair from the original burial site. Voila! The DNA was over a 99% match to Zerelda's lineage, proving conclusively that Jesse James is buried in Missouri, and that J. Frank Dalton was not Jesse James. Of course, Team Dalton is Jesse James was not so easily swayed by science, especially since they believed the testing was incorrectly done. In 2000, they managed to exhume Dalton's remains for testing. Well, they tried to exhume his remains for testing.
What happened during the exhumation in Texas is that you see that these two graves are next to one another. And over time, either the caskets got moved slightly closer to each other, or the headstones have moved over the years. Remember, this headstone got replaced with Jesse James' headstone. So when they dug into the ground here, they came up with a metal vault and a metal casket, whereas Jesse James was supposed to have been buried in a wooden casket. So that's strike one. It's a different casket than the man was supposed to be in. Then the man that they exhume has only one arm. Jesse James had both arms. He shouldn't have a missing arm. But this man, William Henry Holland, who died in 1927, did only have one arm. So they knew almost immediately that they had exhumed the wrong man. And they couldn't send this random Granbury, Texas resident's long bones to California to be tested for Jesse James's DNA. Imagine you're William Holland and you're buried peacefully in your local cemetery, and like 80 years later, because the guy in the casket directly next to you is thought to perhaps be some famous bank robber outlaw, they just dig you out of the ground. What's bonkers to me is that 3 of Jesse James's great-grandsons wanted this man here in Texas exhumed because they thought he was their actual great-grandfather, not the man buried in Missouri.
So you can see why this conspiracy has continued to flourish. An autopsy report saying that Frank Dalton was Jesse James, an exhumation gone awry, so no way to prove he wasn't Jesse James, and actual James relatives giving support to the Jesse James escaped and lived in Texas theory. There was talk of going back and getting Dalton's actual body exhumed.
Little to the left, guys.
But to the best of my knowledge, that still hasn't happened. So until then, the world has but one true grave of Jesse James, and it's not in Granbury, Texas.
My understanding is that there's still a lot of folks here in Granbury, Texas, who think the man buried in that grave is Jesse James, and that they just dug up the wrong bones.
So there you have it. Feared in life. Everyone wants to be him in death. The man, the myth, the iconic corpse, Jesse James. But wait, what about William Henry Holland's missing arm?
Another really important thing about William Holland, the man they incorrectly exhumed right here, is that his arm that was missing, he lost in an accident when he was 13 years old, and that arm is buried in another plot in this cemetery. He is here, his arm is somewhere else. I'm gonna try really hard to find his arm, because you don't see graves very often with just someone's arm. That's exciting in and of itself. Beyond the fact that he was exhumed as Jesse James when he was never even thought to be Jesse James. His casket was just in slightly the wrong place. It's so hot and we can't find William Holland's stupid arm. Sorry, it's not stupid. It's cool that he has his arm buried in this cemetery. It's just so hot. They're just gonna have to bury me here. Except maybe say that I'm someone cooler. Say I'm like Dolly Parton. Yeah, this is it. Oh, you can hardly see it, but you can. It says, arm of W. Holland amputated, 1895. So I think they buried his amputated arm in between 2 infants, which explains the small size of these graves, unfortunately, is because you have 2 babies in one 13-year-old arm. I guess he fell out of a pecan tree. I have learned in searching for this arm here today. This video was made with generous donations from death enthusiasts just like you.
Howdy, y'all. How y'all doing? In a family farm. We had a farm. Just gonna leave this on until I make sure it all looks good.
What's up? It's me, Jesse.
Stash vibes. Get your head in the game. Free from the crimes of their former life. What's a lie? To some, Jesse James was a hero, and to other, he was the most, to one person.
Am I right?
Try saying aptly named bushwhacker 12 times fast.
Aptly named bushwhacker, aptly named bushwhacker. Or did he? Or did he? Or did he?
Pew, pew, pew.
Like Dolly Parton. Or Betty White. Shaka Khan. That's messing with history. That's it. Those are my thoughts. Thank